You stain everything you touch, just like your skin stains my house.
Billionaire Preston Whitfield grabbed a coffee-soaked tablecloth and shoved it into his black maid's face. 6 staff stood frozen.
Sir, it was an accident.
11 months I let a monkey eat under my roof. And this is my thank you?
I'll fix it, sir.
Fix it? Get on your knees.
She looked him in the eye and said,
No.
Dead silence. Preston's face twisted. He grabbed her hair, full fist, and dragged her across white marble. Nobody helped. She didn't cry. She looked at the tiny gold earring in her ear and screamed one word. His hands let go. His knees hit the same floor. Who was this woman? And why did she let this man destroy her for 11 straight months? 11 months earlier. A woman named Lori Calloway stepped through the staff entrance of the Whitfield estate, carrying one small bag and a resume that was fake from top to bottom. No jewelry except 2 tiny gold earrings, short nails, reading glasses on a chain. Everything about her screamed ordinary. That was the point. Because Lori Calloway was not Lori Calloway. She was Lorraine Calloway, senior FBI special agent, 25 years on the job, specializing in human trafficking and labor exploitation. The Bureau had received 14 complaints against Preston Whitfield in 5 years. 14. Assault, false imprisonment, wage theft, racial abuse, but not a single prosecution, because every victim had been silenced with an NDA and a check, and local police looked the other way every single time. So, a federal judge signed an undercover order, and Lorraine volunteered. She'd read the file of a 24-year-old woman named Tanya Brooks, a former Whitfield maid who had a scar on her wrist from a crystal glass he threw at her. After reading that file, Lorraine couldn't sit behind a desk anymore. The Whitfield estate looked like a magazine cover. 22,000 square feet, white columns, rolling green lawn, security cameras in every hallway, but none in private rooms. Lorraine noticed that on day 1. Preston's portrait hung in the main hall. Awards and photos with senators lined his study. From the outside, this was the home of a great man. From the inside, it was a cage. Her first morning, she met the staff. Ruth, the cook, had been there 9 years. She flinched every time a door slammed. James, the gardener, had a purple bruise on his forearm. "Hedge trimmer," he said without looking up. Nobody talked longer than 30 seconds. Nobody smiled. The air in that house felt heavy, like something was always about to happen. Then Preston walked in. He didn't greet anyone. He pointed at a water spot on a glass and looked straight at Lorraine. "If I see that again, you're out. I don't learn names until the 6-month mark. Your kitchen until then." Lorraine nodded. "Yes, sir." He turned to the rest of the staff. "Kitchen, laundry, garden, that's what you are. Real names are for real people." He left. The room stayed silent for a full 10 seconds. Ruth quietly picked up the glass and repolished it. Nobody said a word about what just happened, because in this house that wasn't an event. That was Tuesday. That night in her tiny staff room, Lorraine locked the door. She opened a small drawer she'd secured with a padlock. Inside, a burner phone, a leather notebook, and a photograph of a young black woman with a scar on her wrist. She stared at that photo for a long time. Then she touched her earring, the way a soldier checks a weapon before walking into enemy territory. She adjusted her watch, not to the minute, to the frequency, and she whispered into it, "Day 1, I'm in." 60 miles away, in a dark room full of screens, FBI agent Diane Hollister heard those words and pressed record. Lorraine had studied Preston Whitfield for 6 months before she ever entered his house. She knew his routines, his temper, his pressure points. She knew he was dangerous, but she didn't know about the basement. Not yet. 3 months in, a Tuesday morning, and the beginning of the end. Preston's wife, Catherine, lost a diamond bracelet. It wasn't stolen. Lorraine had seen Catherine leave it on the bathroom counter, then the sofa arm, then the garden bench. That woman misplaced things the way most people breathe. But Preston didn't ask questions. Preston made decisions. He lined all 6 staff members up in the dining room, the same room where he hosted senators and charity donors. He paced back and forth, hands behind his back, jaw tight. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm. That was worse than yelling. Someone in this room is a thief. His eyes moved down the line. Ruth, James, 2 housekeepers, the driver. Then Lorraine. He stopped. You, kitchen, empty your pockets. She did. Nothing. Open your locker. She walked to the staff hall. He followed. Everyone followed. She opened the locker in front of all of them. Uniforms, shoes, a toothbrush, nothing else. He wasn't satisfied. Lift your dress above the knee. The room went cold. Ruth stared at the floor. James looked away. Lorraine gripped the hem of her uniform and lifted it to her knees. The cool air hit her skin. Preston's eyes moved up and down like he was inspecting livestock. Higher. She raised it to mid-thigh. Her fingers trembled, not from shame, from the effort of not breaking cover. Now turn around, slowly. She turned, 360 degrees, in the dining room of a $30 million estate, in front of 5 co-workers who couldn't look at her, for a bracelet that was probably under a sofa cushion. When she completed the turn, Preston just stared at her. 5 seconds, 10 seconds. Then he sniffed and said, "Pull it down." She did. 10 minutes later, Ruth found the bracelet exactly where Lorraine knew it would be, wedged between the cushions in the sitting room. She brought it to Preston quietly. He didn't apologize. He didn't even look at Lorraine. He said 2 words to the room. "Back to work," and walked away. Like nothing happened. Like he didn't just make a woman spin like a mannequin in front of her colleagues for his entertainment. That night, Lorraine spoke into her watch. Date, time, names of everyone present, his exact words. She noted this was the 3rd theft accusation in 3 months, always targeting the newest staff, always ending the same way, with proof of innocence and 0 apology. Then she said something that made Diane go quiet on the other end. "He doesn't do this because he thinks we steal. He does this because he likes to remind us that he can." She opened her leather notebook and wrote 2 words, underlined them 3 times. He'll escalate. She was right. But she had no idea how far. Month 5. A Friday night, and the night Lorraine almost broke cover. Most of the staff had gone home for the weekend. The estate was quiet, just Lorraine finishing up in the upstairs hallway and Ruth cleaning the kitchen downstairs. Preston had been in his study since 4 o'clock. Lorraine could hear his voice through the door, a phone call getting louder, something about a deal falling through, a partnership gone bad, money lost. She knew what that meant. When Preston Whitfield lost money, someone in this house paid for it. She kept her head down and polished the banister. Slow, steady strokes. Stay invisible. Stay quiet. 11 more minutes and she'd be back in her room. The study door opened. Preston walked out holding a glass of bourbon. His face was tight. His eyes were scanning for something to break. He found Lorraine. "Kitchen." "Yes, sir." "What is that smell?" "The polish, sir. I'm almost—" "It smells cheap, like you." He took a sip, stared at her. "You know what I spent on that banister? More than your mother made in her whole pathetic life." Lorraine said nothing. She kept polishing. "Look at me when I'm talking to you." She looked up. There it is. Those dull little eyes. He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell the bourbon on his breath. "You know what I see when I look at you? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. A shadow with a mop." "I'll finish and go, sir." "You'll go when I say you go." He leaned against the wall, swirling his drink. "Tell me something, Kitchen. Where did they find you? What shelter? What program? Who felt sorry enough to put your name on my desk?" The agency sent my resume, sir. The agency? He laughed. They send me a new one every few months. You all look the same, talk the same, smell the same. He drained his glass. Interchangeable, like batteries. Use one up, pop in another. Lorraine's hand tightened around the polishing cloth. She kept her voice flat. Will that be all, sir? Something in her tone, the steadiness of it maybe, made him snap. Did you just rush me? He set the glass down hard on the banister. In my own hallway? In my own house? No, sir, Shut up. He knocked the polished tin out of her hand. It hit the hardwood floor and splattered across the grain. Brown liquid on golden oak. Pick it up. She knelt down. No, not like that. Hands and knees, like the animal you are. She got on her hands and knees. The polish soaked into her uniform, her palms pressed flat against the cold floor. And then she felt it, his shoe pressing down on the back of her right hand. Not enough to break anything, just enough to pin her there. You people always need reminding where you belong. He pressed harder. 15 seconds. 20. The weight of a grown man threw Italian leather onto the bones of her hand. Lorraine counted in her head. Not the seconds, the evidence, date, time, location, his exact words, the shoe, the pressure, the earring capturing everything from floor level, his face from below, twisted with pleasure. Then, footsteps. Gerald Whitfield appeared at the end of the hallway, Preston's son, 34 years old. He saw his father's shoe on a black woman's hand. He saw her on the floor. He saw everything. Preston pulled his foot back, straightened his shirt. She spilled. I was helping. Gerald said nothing. He looked at Lorraine for 2 seconds. Then he turned around, walked back to his room, and closed the door. That click, the sound of a door closing, was louder than anything Preston had said all night. Later, alone in her room, Lorraine spoke into her watch. Her voice was steady, but her hand was swelling. He made physical contact. I have it all on camera. I need more time. Diane's voice came back, crackling. Lorraine, this is enough. We can pull you out tonight. It's not enough. I don't want a settlement, Diane. I don't want a slap on the wrist. I want the whole system he built. Every NDA, every payment, every victim. I want it all. Silence on the line. Then be careful, Diane said. Please. Lorraine hung up. She looked at the bruise forming across her hand. Then she looked at the photograph of Tanya Brooks in her drawer, the scar on that young woman's wrist. She whispered, I'm not leaving until I have enough to bury him. What Lorraine didn't know was that Preston had already started to suspect. Not her identity, not yet, but he'd noticed something, a feeling, the sense that somewhere, somehow, someone was watching, and he was right. Month 7. Preston Whitfield threw his annual charity gala. 200 guests, black ties, crystal chandeliers, a string quartet in the garden, the Whitfield Foundation banner hanging above the entrance, lifting communities, building futures. The irony could choke you. Lorraine worked the event, gray uniform, white gloves, carrying trays of champagne through a sea of designer gowns and $10,000 watches. She moved through that crowd the way she'd moved through this house for 7 months, like furniture. Nobody saw her. Nobody was supposed to. Preston was in his element, laughing, shaking hands, posing for photos. He gave a speech about giving back to underserved communities that lasted 12 minutes. Lorraine stood 6 feet away, holding a water pitcher, while a billionaire who called her monkey in private talked about racial equality in public. Then he snapped his fingers, didn't even look at her. Water, no ice, she poured. He took the glass without acknowledging her hand, turned to his guests and smiled. You have to train them from scratch, but at least this one shows up on time. Light laughter. A few guests glanced at Lorraine. Most didn't. She was invisible. a gray uniform holding a pitcher, exactly what he wanted her to be. Then it almost fell apart. A tech executive named Warren Adler was walking past the kitchen entrance when Lorraine stepped out with a fresh tray. He stopped, stared, grabbed her arm, gently but firmly. "Lorraine? Lorraine Calloway? I saw you at the federal hearing in D.C. last year." Her blood went cold. "I'm sorry, sir. I'm Laurie. Can I get you anything?" Warren didn't blink. He looked at her face, then at the uniform, then back at her face. 5 seconds that felt like 5 hours. "My mistake," he said. But his eyes said something else entirely. Lorraine slipped into the kitchen, heart slamming, hands shaking. She locked herself in the service pantry and whispered into her watch. Partial recognition. Warren Adler, table 6. Diane's voice. "Do we pull you?" "No. Accelerate the timeline. I need the NDA files, the bank transfers, and Tanya's deposition. All by Friday. We go live in 6 weeks." Now, let me be very clear about something. The woman carrying champagne in a gray uniform that night? She was a senior FBI special agent with 25 years of field experience. She'd led raids across 3 continents. She'd put cartel bosses behind bars. She once testified before Congress for 6 straight hours without breaking a sweat. And for 7 months, she let Preston Whitfield call her kitchen. Let him inspect her like property. Let him grind his shoe into her hand. All because the evidence she was building wasn't just going to arrest Preston Whitfield. It was going to dismantle the entire machine he'd built to silence people. Every insult, every slur, every raised hand. 7 months. Over 1,000 hours of footage, all archived, all time-stamped, all admissible in federal court. But Warren Adler didn't stay quiet. 2 days later, Preston's attorney Victor Slade received an anonymous tip. "Someone on your staff is not who they claim to be." The hunt had begun, and Lorraine was the prey. After the gala, something shifted inside Preston Whitfield. He couldn't name it, couldn't point to anything specific. But the air in his house felt different, like someone had left a window open that he couldn't find. Slade's anonymous tip ate at him. He installed 4 new cameras in the staff hallways, started checking phone logs, monitored who came and went and when. He fired 2 workers in the same week. No explanation, no warning, just pack your things and get out by noon. One of them had been there 3 years. She cried in the driveway. Preston watched from the window and sipped his coffee. Lorraine survived the purge. Of course she did. She was the most reliable, most obedient, most invisible employee in the house. The very thing that made her a target for abuse was the thing that kept her safe. Preston never suspected the quiet ones. He suspected the ones who flinched too much, because flinching meant they still had something left to protect. Slade hired a private investigator to vet every current staff member, background checks, employment history, social media, financial records. The PI spent 2 weeks digging into Laurie Calloway and found exactly what the FBI wanted him to find: a boring, unremarkable woman who'd been cleaning houses for 15 years. Fake references that answered the phone on the first ring. A fake Facebook page with posts about grandchildren who didn't exist and recipes she'd never cooked. Military-grade cover, airtight. The PI reported back to Slade. "She's clean. Everyone's clean. Your client is seeing ghosts." Preston wasn't convinced, but he let it go. For now. Then the first crack appeared, not from inside the house, but from the internet. A 12-second clip surfaced on social media. Shaky phone footage, Preston Whitfield screaming at a staff member in a doorway. No names, no context. Just a red-faced billionaire jabbing his finger at a woman half his size. The clip wasn't from Lorraine's camera. It was older footage from a former worker's phone that Diane's team had uncovered during the investigation. 12 seconds, that's all it took. The clip hit 800,000 views in 48 hours. Comment sections exploded. "Who is this man? Someone needs to expose this monster. Rich people really think they own human beings. Shares, reposts, screenshots. The clip spread the way fire spreads through dry grass, fast, messy, and impossible to control. Preston's publicist released a statement within hours. The clip has been taken out of context. Mr. Whitfield has always maintained the highest standards of professionalism and respect toward his household staff. Standard playbook: deny, deflect, discredit. But now reporters were digging. 2 major outlets reached out to former Whitfield employees for comment. Most were bound by NDAs. Most stayed silent. Most. James, the gardener from month 1, the one with the bruise he blamed on a hedge trimmer, gave an anonymous interview to a local newspaper. He didn't name Preston directly, but he described the estate, the rules, the inspections, the way staff were called by room names instead of real ones. He said 4 words that hit like a truck. It's a culture of fear. The article got 200,000 reads in 3 days. Slade sent a cease and desist letter before the ink was dry. But here's what people didn't understand yet. Preston Whitfield wasn't just a man with a temper. He was a system. The NDAs weren't mistakes. They were infrastructure. The shell companies weren't sloppy. They were architecture. Every firing, every settlement, every silenced victim was a brick in a wall he'd been building for 20 years. A wall designed to do one thing: make people disappear. And from inside that wall, Lorraine watched it all unfold. She heard Preston call Slade at 11 o'clock at night, voice shaking with rage. "Find whoever leaked that clip and bury them. I don't care what it costs. I don't care what you have to do. Find them and bury them." She stood in the hallway outside his study, polishing the same section of banister she'd already polished twice, and let the earring capture every word. The public was starting to see cracks in the Whitfield image, but they were only seeing the surface. Lorraine had evidence that went deeper, much deeper, evidence that would turn cracks into craters. And Preston? He was about to lose control again. Worse than the hallway, worse than the gala, because the next time he put his hands on Lorraine Calloway, she wouldn't be the only one watching. 60 miles from the Whitfield estate, in a rented office space with blacked-out windows and 3 deadbolt locks on the door, FBI agent Diane Hollister sat in front of 6 monitors and a wall covered in photographs, documents, and red string. This was the nerve center. Every transmission from Lorraine's earring camera, every whisper into the watch, every file, every receipt, every time-stamped frame, it all lived here. And after 7 months of patience, it was starting to look less like a case file and more like a blueprint of something monstrous. Diane opened her laptop and walked her supervisor through the evidence. The screen filled the room. First, the video. Over 2,400 hours of footage from Lorraine's earring camera alone. Every angle, every room, every confrontation. Diane's team had organized it by date and tagged each clip by incident type. Verbal abuse, physical contact, racial language, labor violation. They'd cut a 47-minute highlight reel of the worst moments. The shoe on the hand, the forced inspection, the spinning, the monkey comments, the snapped fingers at the gala. 47 minutes, and that was the condensed version. Second, the money. Bank records showing a shell company called Whitfield Staffing Solutions, registered in Delaware, had paid out $2.7 million in consulting fees over 5 years. Every single payment went to a former employee. Every single one coincided with an HR complaint that was filed and then withdrawn. The money trail was clean and precise. Preston's personal account to Whitfield Staffing Solutions to a second entity called Heritage Personnel Consulting, controlled by Victor Slade, to direct deposits into the bank accounts of people who signed NDAs. Every transaction time-stamped, every cent accounted for. Third, the emails. A chain between Slade and an HR management firm discussing what they called containment protocol for a 2021 incident. A maid had accused Preston of assault. Slade's email read, Settle at $120K. Standard NDA. Social media clause. Make sure the hospital records are flagged as private. Hospital records. A woman had been hospitalized. Fourth, the pattern. Diane had built a timeline on the wall. 42 domestic workers in 5 years. 14 formal complaints. 11 ND as signed. 3 hospital visits. 0 prosecutions. When you laid it all out in a straight line, it didn't look like a series of isolated incidents. It looked like a machine. But the evidence that hit hardest wasn't on a spreadsheet. It was on video. Tanya Brooks sat in a gray room in front of a camera. She was 28 now. Steady voice, clear eyes, but her hands shook the entire time. She described the 18 months she spent at the Whitfield estate. She described how Preston called her laundry for the first 6 months and girl after that. She described the night he got angry because she'd folded a napkin wrong. He threw a crystal glass, a Waterford tumbler, across the room. It shattered against the counter, and a piece of it sliced her wrist. She described the blood, the white towel she wrapped around it, the way Preston looked at the cut and said, "Clean that up before it stains." She described Slade arriving the next morning with papers and a check. He said if I signed, I'd get $95,000. If I didn't, I'd get nothing. And they'd countersue for defamation. I was 24 years old. I didn't have a lawyer. I didn't have family who could help. So I signed. Then she said the part that made Diane stop the tape and sit in silence for a full minute. After I signed, Mr. Whitfield called me into his study. He looked at my wrist, the bandage was still on, and he smiled. He said, "Now you know your place, don't you?" Tanya paused, looked straight into the camera. I knew, and I never forgot. But Lorraine had found something else, something even Diane didn't expect. The basement, not the wine cellar that appeared on the estate blueprints. A room behind the water heater, accessible through a utility door that was always locked. Lorraine picked it on month 6 when Preston was in New York. Inside, a filing cabinet, 4 drawers, organized alphabetically. Every NDA, every settlement agreement, every complaint letter, every photograph of every bruise that was ever documented and then buried. Preston Whitfield kept the originals, not because he had to. Slade had digital copies of everything. He kept them because he liked to. They were trophies. Lorraine photographed every single page with the earring camera. 147 documents. It took her 3 hours. When she transmitted the files to Diane that night, she said one sentence that changed the scope of the entire investigation. He keeps trophies, not because he needs to, because he likes to remember what he did to them. And then, Diane found something that blew the case wide open. Slade's firm didn't just represent Preston Whitfield, it represented 11 other high-net-worth clients across 4 states, all with the same pattern. NDAs, shell companies, silenced workers, the same playbook, the same architecture. Preston wasn't an exception. He was a franchise. Diane called her supervisor that night. This isn't one man, this is a network. And if we pull this thread, the whole thing unravels. They had enough to arrest Preston Whitfield, enough to end his public life. But Lorraine wanted one more thing. She wanted him to do it again, on camera, in a moment so clear that no lawyer, no PR firm, no NDA could spin it. She didn't have to wait long, month 9, and the walls were closing in from every direction. The viral clip and the newspaper article had done something to Preston that money couldn't fix. They'd scratched his image, and Preston Whitfield would rather lose a limb than lose his image. So he did what powerful men always do when they feel exposed. He squeezed tighter. New rules appeared overnight. Staff wages were cut 15%. Austerity measures, he called it, as if a billionaire needed to save money on the people who scrubbed his toilets. But it was never about money. It was about reminding everyone who held the leash. Meals changed too. Staff used to eat at the kitchen table between shifts. Not anymore. Preston moved them to the laundry room. 6 human beings eating lunch on the floor between running washing machines and piles of dirty clothes. Lorraine sat cross-legged on cold tile, balancing a plate on her knee while the smell of detergent mixed with reheated rice. Preston walked by once, looked down at them through the doorway, and said, "See? That's where you belong." Nobody responded. Nobody ever did. The room inspections started next, weekly. Preston himself, not a manager, not a supervisor, going through staff quarters with his bare hands, flipping mattresses, opening drawers, checking under beds. When he got to Lorraine's room, he picked up a framed photograph from her nightstand, a fake family photo the FBI had staged. He looked at it, held it up to the light. "Who would want to come home to you?" He tossed it on the bed and walked out. Lorraine stood perfectly still until his footsteps faded down the hall. Then she picked up the photo and placed it back exactly where it was. The same week, Tanya Brooks received a letter. Not a lawsuit, something worse. A friendly reminder from Slade's firm that her NDA carried a $500,000 penalty clause for any form of disclosure. The message was clear. "We know you talked." Tanya called Lorraine on the burner phone at 2 in the morning. Her voice was shaking so hard she could barely get the words out. They know. They know I talked. Oh God, Lorraine, they're going to take everything. Listen to me. Your deposition is protected under federal court order. They can send all the letters they want. They cannot touch you. I promise you that. You promise? On my life." Lorraine hung up, sat on the edge of her bed, and for the first time since she'd entered this house, she felt the weight of it all pressing down. Then Ruth came to her door. The cook, 9 years in this house. She spoke in a whisper. "He asked about you today, whether you use your phone at night, whether you go places you're not supposed to." Lorraine's stomach dropped. "I told him no," Ruth said. "But Laurie, he knows something's off. Be careful, please." Ruth wasn't a traitor. She was a survivor, and her warning was real. That night, Lorraine didn't check in with Diane right away. Instead, she sat on her bed and read the letters. Not case files, not evidence. Letters. Dozens of them. Sent to the FBI's tip line by domestic workers across America who had heard rumors about an investigation into wealthy employers. A woman in Texas who was locked in a laundry room for 8 hours because she asked for a day off. A man in Connecticut whose employer confiscated his passport and told him he'd be deported if he complained. A grandmother in Georgia who worked 14-hour days for 11 years and was paid less than minimum wage the entire time. 47 letters. Every single one ended the same way. Nobody believed me. Lorraine Calloway, the woman who had spent 9 months without flinching, without crying, without breaking character for a single second, sat on a narrow bed in a staff room that smelled like laundry detergent and cried. Not for herself. For them. For all of them. Then she stopped, wiped her face, picked up the burner phone. "Diane, move the timeline up. 2 weeks. I want everything ready. Every file, every witness, every agent in position. When this thing breaks, I don't want him to be able to look anywhere without seeing his own face." 2 weeks, 14 days. She just had to survive 14 more days. But Preston Whitfield had other plans. And they involved a fist, a marble floor, and a woman he still believed was nobody. 10 days before the operation, and the case cracked wide open from the last person anyone expected, Gerald Whitfield, Preston's only son, 34 years old, trust fund, corner office at Whitfield Properties that he barely used, a man who had spent his entire adult life enjoying the empire his father built without ever questioning what it was built on. Until now. The email arrived at the FBI's secure tip line at 3:47 a.m. on a Wednesday. No name, no greeting, just one line. "I know what my father does. I've known for years. I have recordings." Diane didn't trust it. Could be a trap. could be slayed fishing for leaks. She ran the IP through 3 separate verification channels, traced the device, cross-referenced the email metadata. It took 4 days to confirm what she already suspected. It was Gerald's personal laptop, sent from a hotel room in Richmond, 40 miles from the estate. It was real. Diane arranged a meeting. Neutral location, a rented office, no recording, not yet. Gerald walked in looking like he hadn't slept in a week. Wrinkled shirt, red eyes, hands that wouldn't stop moving. "Before we start," he said, "I need you to know something. I'm not doing this because I'm brave." Diane waited. "I'm doing this because 2 years ago I watched my father press his shoe into a woman's hand in the upstairs hallway. She was on her knees. He was smiling, and His voice broke. "I turned around. I went back to my room, and I closed the door." He stared at the table. What kind of man closes the door? Nobody answered, because there was no good answer. Gerald had been secretly recording his father for 2 years. Not strategically, not as part of some plan. He'd started doing it the way people start keeping journals when they can't sleep, because the guilt had to go somewhere. His phone had captured things that even Lorraine's earring camera hadn't. A video from Thanksgiving 2023, Preston slapping a housekeeper across the face because she served the cranberry sauce in the wrong dish. The sound was sharp, skin on skin, and the woman's head snapped sideways. She didn't make a sound. She just picked up the dish and walked out. An audio recording from a family dinner. Preston using racial slurs so casually that he didn't even lower his voice, talking about his staff the way a farmer talks about livestock. Catherine sitting across from him, eating her salad, saying nothing, and then the recording that changed everything. Preston on the phone with Victor Slade, his voice low but clear. "That Brooks girl is talking. I don't know who she's talking to, but I want it stopped, whatever it takes. I don't care if it's a letter, a lawsuit, or a knock on her door at midnight. Shut her up." Gerald played that recording for Diane. The room was dead silent when it ended. "That was 6 months ago," Gerald said. "I've been carrying it around like a bomb. I didn't know who to give it to. I didn't know if anyone would believe me over him." He looked up. "Do you believe me?" "Yes," Diane said. "I believe you." The same week, another piece fell into place. A public records request that Diane had filed 3 months earlier finally came back, with body camera footage from Deputy Elaine Greer. 8 months before Lorraine ever entered the Whitfield estate, someone had called 911 about a disturbance on the property. Deputy Greer responded. Her body cam showed her pulling up to the front gate. Whitfield security tried to wave her off. She insisted on entering. What the camera captured was damning. A young black woman, a housekeeper, being escorted off the property by 2 security guards. She was crying, shaking, saying the same thing over and over. "He hit me, he hit me, he hit me." And standing behind her, calm as a Sunday morning, was Victor Slade, hands in his pockets, smiling. "She's confused, officer. She tendered her resignation this morning. We're just helping her collect her things. Everything's under control." Deputy Greer filed a report that night. Possible domestic violence. Employer/employee. Recommend follow-up. Nobody followed up. The report sat in a filing cabinet at the county sheriff's office, gathering dust until Diane pulled it. Now, Tanya's testimony, Gerald's recordings, Greer's body cam, the financial trail, the emails, the basement trophies, the 2,400 hours of earring footage. It was all coming together. And then Tanya made a decision that nobody saw coming. She called Diane on a Tuesday afternoon, voice steady, no shaking this time. "I'm done hiding. I want to go on camera, real name, real face. I want everyone to see this scar and know exactly who put it there." She recorded a new statement that same day. She held up her wrist. The scar was pale and jagged, a permanent souvenir from a Waterford crystal tumbler and a man who told her to clean up her own blood. "This used to make me ashamed," she said. "Not anymore. This is proof. Proof that I survived. Proof that I told the truth. And proof that he lied." The final night before the operation, Lorraine sat in her staff room one last time. She looked at the gray uniform hanging on the back of the door, touched the earring, adjusted the watch. Tomorrow she would stop being invisible. But tonight, she let herself be Lori one last time, the woman who polished silver and said yes, sir, and survived. She owed that woman everything. Then Preston called her into his study, made her kneel, threw a dirty cloth at her feet. "Shine my shoes." She shined them, on her knees, in silence. "See," he said, looking down at her. "That's the natural order. You're below, I'm above. Don't ever forget it." "Yes, sir." The earring captured everything: his face, his shoes, her knees on the floor, the cloth in her hands. Tomorrow the natural order was going to flip, and Preston Whitfield had no idea. 11:47 a.m. The grand foyer, sunlight pouring through floor-to-ceiling windows onto white Italian marble, and a coffee stain on a tablecloth. That's all it was. A brown ring on white linen, the kind of thing that happens 1,000 times a day in 1,000 houses across America. You wipe it, you move on, you forget it by lunch. But this wasn't 1,000 houses. This was Preston Whitfield's house. And Preston Whitfield didn't forget. Lorraine was carrying the breakfast tray through the foyer when the cup tilted. Just slightly, just enough. A small circle of brown on white fabric. She reached for a cloth immediately. "I'll get it, sir." "What did you just do?" Preston was standing by the window. He'd been staring at his phone, reading the hashtag, reading the articles, reading comments from strangers calling him a monster. His blood had been boiling since 6 a.m., and now, a stain. On his tablecloth, in his foyer, by the same black woman he'd been trying to break for 11 months. He crossed the room in 3 steps. 11 months. His voice was low, quiet, the dangerous kind of quiet. 11 months I kept you, fed you, gave you a roof, and you still can't do one simple thing. It was an accident, sir. Everything with you is an accident. He grabbed the tablecloth and threw it off the table. Glasses shattered on marble. A vase hit the floor. Your kind doesn't have accidents. Your kind is the accident. Mr. Whitfield, shut your mouth. Get on your knees. She didn't move. I said, get on your knees. No. The word landed like a gunshot. 6 staff members, Ruth in the kitchen doorway, James by the garden entrance, 4 others scattered through the hall, all froze. In 11 months, nobody had ever said that word to Preston Whitfield. Not in this house, not on this marble, not to his face. Preston's expression didn't change at first. It went blank, like a computer rebooting. Then it twisted into something Lorraine had never seen before. Not anger, not rage, something past both of those. Something animal. What did you say to me? I said no. He grabbed her hair, not a pull, not a yank. He wrapped her bun around his fist like a rope, twisted until her head snapped back. She felt her neck strain, felt the roots scream, felt her knees buckle and hit cold marble. Then he dragged her, 3 feet, 5 feet, 7 feet across white stone. Her knees scraped marble. Her uniform tore at the shoulder. Her hands reached for his wrist, not to fight, not to beg, to angle the earring camera directly at his face. He was screaming now. You want to say no? In my house? On my floor? You're nothing! You're a stain! You're nothing! Ruth covered her mouth in the kitchen doorway. James took 1 step forward, then stopped. Nobody helped. Nobody moved. 6 witnesses. 6 statues. Lorraine looked up at him, hair in his fist, knees on stone, and with a voice that didn't shake, didn't waver, didn't break, She screamed one word. "Federal!" 60 miles away, Diane Hollister heard it through her earpiece. Her hand hit the button. "Go, go, go!" The first sound Preston heard was the front door. Not a knock, an explosion. Wood splintered, glass shattered. Then the back door, then the kitchen entrance, then windows, one after another, crashing inward. Boots on marble, 16 pairs, moving fast. Then the helicopter. The sound came through the ceiling, deep, heavy, shaking the chandelier. Shadow crossed the windows as it dropped low over the lawn. Men and women in blue jackets poured into the foyer from every direction. 3 letters on every chest. FBI. "FBI, don't move! Hands where we can see them! Release her now!" Preston's hand was still in Lorraine's hair. His eyes, for the first time in 11 months, were wide. Not angry, not commanding, terrified. The kind of terror that comes when a man realizes that everything he built, everything he bought, everything he buried, just surfaced. All at once. In front of everyone. He let go. Lorraine stood up. Slowly. Hair loose and wild where his fist had been, uniform torn at the shoulder, knees raw from marble, but she was standing. And he was shrinking. His legs gave out. Not because anyone pushed him, his body simply quit. His knees hit the same marble hers had just bled on, the same floor he'd dragged her across, the same stone he'd made her crawl on, kneel on, shine his shoes on. Now it was his floor, and he was on it. Lorraine looked down at him, for the first time in 11 months, from above. And when she spoke, it wasn't Laurie's voice, not the whisper, not the "yes, sir." It was the voice of a woman who had commanded raids across 3 continents, a voice that had made cartel bosses go silent. "My name is Lorraine Calloway, Senior Special Agent, Federal Bureau of Investigation." She paused. Let it land. "And I am not your maid." Gerald appeared in the doorway of the East Wing. He saw his father on his knees. He saw Lorraine standing over him. Tears ran down his face. But this time, he didn't close the door. 2 agents lifted Preston to his feet, turned him to face the wall. Handcuffs clicked around his wrists. Miranda rights. Calm, professional voices reading words that no amount of money could silence. Preston's eyes stayed locked on Lorraine the entire time, on her face, on the earring, the tiny gold stud he'd never thought twice about, the one that had been watching him, recording him, for 11 straight months. Outside, a neighbor's phone was already filming. The helicopter, the armored vehicles, Preston Whitfield in handcuffs being walked to a black SUV. The footage hit the internet within minutes. 23 million views in 24 hours. Hashtag Whitfield silence became hashtag Whitfield falls. And the moment that would be replayed 100 million times, shared, screenshotted, turned into memes and murals and protest signs, was 7 seconds long. A woman on a marble floor. One word, and a billionaire who finally learned what it felt like to be powerless. The aftermath came fast. Within 1 hour, Preston Whitfield III was formally charged at the federal courthouse in Alexandria. 4 counts of assault, 12 counts of labor law violation, conspiracy to obstruct justice, bail set at $5 million. Every camera in the country pointed at that courtroom door. Within 1 day, FBI agents raided Victor Slade's office. 4 filing cabinets, 6 hard drives, 11 years of NDAs, shell company records, and settlement agreements. The same playbook, used on the same kind of people over and over. Slade was disbarred within the month. His own indictment came 3 weeks later. Within 1 week, 42 former employees came forward. People who had been silent for years walked into FBI field offices and told their stories. Every NDA was voided by federal court order. Every gag clause, every penalty, gone. Gerald testified against his father. When the prosecutor asked why he waited so long, Gerald said, "Because I was a coward." The courtroom went silent. Tanya Brooks sat in the front row the day the verdict came down. She didn't speak to reporters. She walked outside, held up her wrist so the scar caught the sunlight, and let the cameras do the rest. 2 states introduced legislation banning NDA clauses in abuse-related settlements. They called it the Callaway-Brooks Act. It passed committee within 90 days. Lorraine held a press conference 3 weeks after the arrest. Charcoal suit. Simple. Elegant. No gold earrings this time. Small diamonds instead. She looked straight into the camera and said, "I wore a gray uniform for 11 months. I was called kitchen. I was searched, humiliated, made to eat on a laundry room floor, made to shine shoes on my knees, dragged across marble by my hair, not because I had to, because 42 people before me had no choice. They are the reason I walked into that house, and they are the reason I'm standing here today." That night, Diane Hollister sat alone in a dark office. The Whitfield case files were closed, archived, done, but a new file was open on her screen. A different estate, a different city, a different billionaire, same playbook. She picked up the phone. "I have another one, bigger name. How soon can we start?"